Can all the RRaD members come on stage? All the RRaD members, please come up on stage.
Okay. Yeah, we. This has been a wonderful experience so far. We are very, very pleased and very thrilled with all the speakers so far, and also all the participants here. All of you here asking great questions, brilliant questions, and so much to reflect on. So thank you, everyone. I want to begin with sharing our RRaD's experiences so far. Yeah, by the way, I'm Ellen. I'm very, very honored to share this panel with my friends here, Dr. Dolly Kikon. You know, we're very proud of her, one of the most exciting anthropologists in the world, and we get to call her our friend and work together. Thank you, Dolly. And we have Dr. Panger Kichu. He's a professor of theology and ethics at Oriental Theological Seminary. And we have Nipuni Piku over there. He is a human rights activist, a veteran amongst us. Repatriation of ancestral human remains is an initiative taken by different communities across the world. And we Nagas, we are joining this global conversation precisely about 4 years ago in 2020. And what I came to learn, what the team came to learn is that this is an initiative, first of its kind in Southeast Asia. So this is a huge responsibility for us. And as I mentioned yesterday, we are no experts, but we are here and we are working together. And so in its facilitating role, the FNR formed the RRaD team in 2021 to study and network with indigenous experts, conduct participatory action research, generate public awareness, and develop a strong, viable case to make the repatriation claim to the University of Oxford. We do have our values and objectives on our website. You can check it out. And I want to read our values. RRaD values include being open to inquiries and creating safe spaces for a people-centered approach that is inclusive, collaborative, transparent, and accountable. It seeks to preserve and understand the history of the Naga people through a dignified return of human remains and open pathways for healing across generations that renews the human spirit. So to help us navigate this process, we have been in touch with other indigenous leaders who have had similar experiences. And we started this during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. So we started having Zoom meetings with leaders across the world, and this has been a great learning process for us. We have done this process in phases. So the first phase one, includes conducting interviews, conversation with our community leaders, with scholars, with church, with individuals, and we explored the Naga context and our current environment. The Naga public had very limited exposure and information about the Naga ancestral human remains. And during our work, we identified a sense of curiosity, a lot of questions about the remains being boxed up, stored away in museums, how they came to be there. You know, people were very curious. And in phase two, we went about expanding our conversation to the communities. So our work on phase two consisted of 5 main areas, and one is conducting Morong lectures, mainly here in Dimapur and Kohima. Secondly, we organize focus groups consisting of about a dozen people, 12 to 15 people, sometimes 20, people from all walks of life, all ages. We went about conducting this in many places in Nagaland. And thirdly, we made trips to different districts, and engage cultural groups. We call them cultural groups, not tribes, but cultural groups, and institutions, including a trip to the University of Melbourne on the invitation of the Vice Chancellor. And fourthly, we have visual stories in the form of a graphic novel, which is displayed there. This is a graphic novel entitled A Path Home, authored by Dr. Arkotong Longkama and illustrated by Meren Imchen. And fifth, we also found the need to translate our statement, the repatriation statement. And so we have 23 translations commissions so far, and we have had people translate to 19 Naga languages, which you can have access on our website. So this repatriation journey is a new journey for all of us. We have been invited to explore our world, you know, our past, our current world, and also to look forward to how we should make our path, you know, towards the future. We have been to many places like Mon area, villages like Chi, Longwa. We've met elders, students, community leaders, women group, youth group, children, the church associations. We've been to places like Zenepoto, Mukukchong, Wokha, Longleng, and it's been a great journey of discovery, of building relationships and exploring together the repatriation journey. And we have also learned a lot, you know, as we went along interacting with people, and we have faced challenges. We have learned many things, unlearned many things, which Dr. Dolly will share with us.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and hello, everyone. It's still before 12 noon, so a very good morning to you all. We have friends and students, elders coming for the second day, and we have some new faces. So welcome to this conversation that we're having. So I'm given the task of spelling out some of the learnings, the challenges, and the opportunities. And you know, if I have to put all the 3 terms given as a member of RRaD, instituted by the FNR, the one word would be immense. I have learned a lot. I have faced, I think, challenges like all team members, and also I've seen immense opportunities in what we are doing. I wanted to perhaps bring our attention to the connection that we are making here today. And a lot of the questions yesterday and also today were about the local context and how do we understand. And understanding decolonization in the local context will be very, very important. And I'll come back to why that is. But at the same time, I think like Alan said, how is it that this local context and what we are doing is connected to the international dialogues taking place is also another important theme that we need to connect, that we need to understand. It comes back, I think, both to the terms healing, decolonization, and repatriation. And like I shared in my reflections yesterday, these three terms were actually in the 20th century led by indigenous communities and scholars. So it is yours to debate, it is yours to embrace, and it is yours to reflect. Had the term decolonization never been raised by indigenous scholars and thinkers, it would never, never have entered the academy, trust me. I shared a few years ago that the term decolonization is open to debate, but some of the biggest institutions of higher education around the world are actually making it a part of university policy to make sure that indigenous scholarship, that indigenous thinkers, that indigenous methodologies, like the one we saw about community archaeology that Professor Tiatoshi shared, are methods that is included in university curriculums, in curriculums of higher education. What we are facing is something very new. I'd like to underline that the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People that a lot of indigenous scholars and communities hold as important is very, very new. So the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was only recognized in 2007 by the United Nations General Assembly. So we are actually the recipients in the 21st century of immense work that went on in the 20th century with the fractured history of decolonization across Africa and Asia. And what I want you all to do as students and fellow travelers is to actually link your work to the indigenous, to the advocacy, and to the conversations that's gone on in the 20th century. Today, if you find an invitation coming your way, maybe as a scheduled tribe, there are reservations here in this country, affirmative actions, there are conversations that are going on, you all need to be part of it. One of the questions that I received from a participant yesterday was about tribalism. What do we do about repatriation and tribalism? We are so split up, we are so torn apart. I want to actually perhaps pose a challenge to you all that we have been made to accept tribalism as a negative word. We have been told that it is terrible to be united, to be together is negative, and it is tribalism that tears us apart. Majority of the governments in the continent of Africa, in other parts, indigenous communities, are also very tribalistic. The First Nations in North America are also very tribalistic. So what tribalism in a sense is meaning perhaps also requires decolonization, like our friends this morning was encouraging us to do. So the process of decolonization, if I may put it, one of the challenges that we have faced, and also the opportunities. So the learning, the challenges, and the opportunities are all together. So take it as a circle, right? As a circular thing. It's not a break. Is that when we see a challenge, we begin to learn and unlearn together. And for us this morning, it is this word called tribalism. Were we not tribalistic, we wouldn't be here. For harvest festivals, what do you do? For weddings, what do you do? At death ceremonies, what do we do? At the moment of birth, what do we do? So if you as Naga scholars, as thinkers, have to revisit the word tribalism, think it in a way that has helped us to come and be united. So if a corrupt politician is giving money only to his constituency, why not bring in the Indian parliamentary system as well in your analysis and what it has done to split communities? Why not have that framework? Right. It is not about perhaps learning together and dwelling on the challenges, but also this opportunity that we can learn from one another, then we can teach one another. Remember, the decolonizing and the decolonial terms are works in progress. No one will come and tell you that it is complete. It will be complete the day you die. It is a faith, it is a spiritual journey. So you come and teach me and I come and teach you. The decolonizing work in our local context is, I have to see it, all the places where we traveled. Some of the worst roads are in Mon. I thought Woka was bad. Man, I went to Mon. And the road between, what? The road, small stretch between, have you been to Lumami from Woka? Have you seen the road to Doyang? Yeah. Policies. How do we talk about decolonization and policies? How do we talk about governance? How do we talk about higher education? How do we talk about global connections? Well, if I have to think about the decolonial, it's also the road, Chumukinima road, na? Sob pangishe jaishe. What about our local scientists, our geologists, our experts? Why not we come together and we think about policies together? Because we have to separate the indigenous knowledge as something primitive and dark. We have to look at indigenous knowledge as recognized by indigenous scientists who are now, in the departments of astronomy, in the departments of geology, in the sciences, looking at plants and ancestral knowledge as well. For me, that is a decolonial work, and this is what I've learned from the journey. But the challenges, of course, are that we require more spaces like that. Increasing opportunities of indigenous scholarships and also for scholars working, historians, archaeologists, myself, anthropologists, sociologists, to look at methodologies. It is only through indigenous scholarship, as a researcher, as a professor, did I come across theories of care, did I come across the methodology of community participation. And I think these are immense contributions we're making to the world of knowledge and higher education, and we should applaud ourselves for that as well. We have to learn, when we critique the decolonial, the decolonizing methodologies, we have to learn to appreciate that our voices are heard in higher education today as leaders, as thinkers, because of the ancestral work of our elders across the world who put in the hard work. And as Naga scholars, as Naga communities, we need to rise to the occasion. And it is in conversations through that, bringing our minds together, that we're able to do it. The fourth point I want to quickly focus is actually diversity of knowledge. And it is so important. Each of you sitting here, do not belittle the challenges that you are expressing. This is a safe space. The diversity of knowledge that is important, and how is it that the process of decolonization is immensely important. I quickly want to actually, the final thing is, because I'm trying to make the connection between the local context and the global, tell you about American universities at the moment. In the university where I teach as a professor, this year we have a unit called the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act 1990 unit. So it's known as NAGPRA. And NAGPRA is a federal law in the United States. Anything to do with repatriation, anything to do with human remains and artifacts that belongs to First Nations and indigenous communities. Now, there is a national law that it should be given to descendant communities and to the respective cultural organizations and to communities. For the first time, the University of California, Santa Cruz has a historic moment where we have now an office on campus, and every university now is expected to have an office where indigenous scholars and students can actually go and discuss. So for us, this is actually an opportunity also to think together and, in a sense, to understand. Maybe I will just stop here for now, and then I will give the time to Ellen.
We have the exhibition of our photos of our travel over there in the corner, and we also have photos on our website, so please do visit. At this moment, we will have the critical reflection from Dr. Asangba, and followed by Q&A session.
I'm scared. Thank you. I can hold the mic for you.
So nice to see you.
You know what to say. A very good day to all of you. Actually, I don't deserve to be here, but at the same time, I take this as a great privilege to share some thoughts. I was not able to attend the morning session yesterday, but okay. Now am I? Yeah, I am audible now. Okay. So post session, I was there. So I had the privilege and the opportunity to listen to the presenters, and listening to the presentations, I have come to a realization that initially my thought was only about the bones, but it's much more than that. It's really big. And I just want to add to that it's about rediscovering, repatriation, and invoking of a larger Naga life world. So I don't want to keep you in suspense, and therefore I will just say that I have a reading to do about 5-6 pages, and which I will try to finish in about 10 minutes. Okay. So I have just randomly titled my paper, Naga Repatriation, Opportunities and Challenges. A critical reflection in any engagement calls for the application of certain standards, which includes clarity, accuracy, precision, significance, relevance, completeness, logicalness, fairness, breadth, and depth. In the process of engagement with these terms, we also learn to develop the elements like purpose, inference, questions, conception, viewpoints, and implications. And I am still coming to terms with the standards and elements in constructing the larger picture. So nonetheless, I begin with the question, is Naga repatriation really necessary? It is quite strange to be asking whether Naga repatriation is really necessary. Besides other serious considerations, the uncertainties and sensitivities and of time and unknown duration beg such a question. The Naga repatriation is also at the phase where it is easy to pass moral judgments on people who are leading. However, I believe the ongoing process of conscientizing the general public through various mediums and formats will help broaden the perspectives in concretizing the concept and context of Naga repatriation, especially its closure within the decolonizing framework. So let me share some key ideas of repatriation, and it will reflect the opportunities. Number one, restitution, returning ancestral remains and cultural items to their rightful owners. How will Nagas as a whole make a rightful claim? The rightful claim also includes how Nagas frame our own policies towards making a rightful claim, and where the claim also includes the right Naga owner, or who is finally consented as the rightful owner. Number two, reconciliation and healing, which includes addressing historical injustices and promoting healing between communities. The terms reconciliation and healing are very deep and layered, and which is a process that requires renewal and recommitment, as it needs to be located within an ongoing conception of Naga Repatriation, which is a new terminology in Naga parlance. Today, advancement in technology, so also globalization, has enabled an opportunity to locate and relocate our history in our pursuit towards a richer understanding of our history and the meaningful discourses that can evolve. Photographic remnants, archival records, and cultural artifacts pertaining to Nagas preserved in faraway lands and for a very long time unknown to the Nagas, and finally coming to light, has evoked a deep sense of nostalgia, inducing emotions of belongingness and a sense of longing, and which has remained a privileged access not for us but for the others. This change in July 2020, when the Pitt Rivers Museum, Oxford, after due consideration of the ethics of displaying human remains in their museum, had removed from display when the museum opened up after the COVID-19 pandemic, and decided to work with different communities to return the ancestral human remains taken during the period of British imperialism. As per their record, approximately 214 ancestral remains, a combination of skeletal ancestral remains and objects made with components such as human hair or bone, are in the museum's care. While Pitt Rivers Museum has given a right, so also an opportunity to the Nagas, it has also initiated a process, so to say, a closure of sorts from their end, and thereby create multidimensional pathways of healing and reconciliation in the Naga context, where pieces of historical events comes to haunt us, and where a fuller understanding and appreciation of history towards reconciliation and healing can be initiated among Naga communities, tribes, and villages. 3, self-determination as an opportunity. It recognizes indigenous people's rights to control their own cultural heritage. So on this, all I will say is that Nagas are in dire need of revisiting and reawakening our self-determining capacity by localizing a oneness in defining and giving life to the idea of ownership, and which cannot be detached from responsibility. This is our chance at asserting our rights within its indigenousness. Number 4, cultural preservation, which is about preserving ancestral remains and cultural items for future generations. This is an aspect which is going to evoke different emotions, even hurtful, yet it also presents an opportunity to revitalize culture and history, and also a chance at recrafting Naga culture and history. 5thly, collaborative efforts involving communities in the repatriation process, ensuring their concerns and wishes are respected. Led by FNR and the research team RRaD, they have, in educating and creating awareness, have initiated a process of connected learning. Their concerted efforts have reawakened terms and concepts like recovering, restoring, decolonizing, reconciliation, and healing, and to treat these concepts professionally, emotionally, and sensitively while engaging with diverse Naga communities across. Let me now jump to the key ideas of repatriation, and in doing that, I will also bring about the challenges. First is the origin and identification of our forefathers' bone remains, which I hope the RRaD team will have more to elaborate. Then the second is community consultation, engagement and dialogue. Third one is differing religious and cultural worldviews and institutional resistance. The fourth one is legal and regulatory framework. And on this, I would like to just highlight some key elements. in the process of repatriation, and here are some specific Indian laws and policies on repatriation of human remains from foreign countries to India. The first one is the Antiquities and Art Treasures Act 1972 of Section 25. I don't want to go into the details of the act just to save time. The second is the Ministry of Culture's Guidelines for Repatriation of Cultural Property 2019. The Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, DRI, Guidelines for Import and Export of Human Resources 2019, and the Indian Customs Act 1962, which falls under Section 11. And the next is the Foreign Trade, Development and Regulation Act 1992 of Section 11, the Biological Diversity Act 2002, Section 7, the National Mission on Monuments and Antiquarian Remains. So besides these regulations, it will be further governed by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs and the Home Affairs. Yet the Naga Repatriation also needs to create a policy framework which also calls for the power of negotiation in our own cultural context, Number 5 is the ethics and morality, where we need to have respect for the dead. The dead must be remembered and honored according to customs. Exhibiting human remains can be seen as disrespectful to the deceased and their communities. Cultural sensitivity, many cultures considers it a depot to display human remains, and doing so can cause harm and offense. Then the third one, informed consent. Often human remains were collected without consent or through exploitative means, making their exhibition morally questionable. The fourth one, educational value. Some argue that exhibiting human remains can serve educational purpose, but this must be balanced against the potential harm cost. All these issues connected with ethics and morality need thorough deliberation within the process of Naga repatriation. On the whole, there is both an opportunity and a challenge to generate ideas and perspectives that are informed by social justice, inclusivity, and critical thinking. This calls for considering the ways in which power, privilege, and access operate in society, while also challenging how power and control operates in a society. At its mercy are issues associated with intersectionality, empathy and perspective taking, inclusivity, representation, and social justice. This requires empowering the masses as the process of educating, learning, and creating awareness continues, led by the RRaD team. So let me share some concerns. Is the Naga repatriation weighed in by academics and idealism? Coming to terms with new concepts seems to have also created an academic burden on the discourse, which often finds beyond the understanding of the general public. Yet an academic framework is much desirable while relocating the concepts in owning and contextualizing the Naga repatriation. However, I may be wrong, but I get a general air of feeling that we are too cautious and sensitive to meanings and conceptions of the academia in the pursuit of the Naga repatriation, while subverting our own conception. Whose memory, whose feeling, and whose healing is it all about? There seems to be a need for simplification in context, otherwise there is a danger of getting lost in the details. There is also the danger of creating unnecessary complications if the concepts are too idealistic, like in the Platonic sense of his world of ideas or forms. It is also imperative that a contextual academia is pursued with reference to the other's more pronounced historical and emotional context, but as a point of departure in defining the Naga repatriation in our own context, considering the Naga uniqueness. Nagas finds misrepresented in colonial history, wherein the misplaced context continues to trigger different stereotype identity markers. Yes, history has happened, but there are certain integral aspects of history which have helped shape a people's narrative and worldviews, struggles, imagination, and aspirations, and which also instill a sense of belongingness and cannot be forgotten. Today, the Naga Repatriation has presented a window opportunity to revisit and rewrite a part of colonial history from the Naga lens, inculcating a sense of collective ownership. So I would want to bring a story here. Sarimaya Awanga, Thankul Naga from Manipur's Ugrul village, had to sleep alongside human skulls of enemies killed during wars fought between rival villages or between Naga and non-Naga villages to serve the purpose of preserving history of his tribe. Considered as a pride of the village for the story each of it holds, the state government was approached on several occasions seeking help to preserve the skulls, but they were instead requested to hand over to the government, which they refused, saying that it was something which they cannot part away with, injecting a Naga feeling which is neither borrowed nor imposed from others' experiences, and making it a shared story by extending the context to generate feelings of shared belongingness, thereby making it into a shared story. But throughout the process, it also means taking ownership. Taking ownership becomes complicated when there is no self-determination. And the third one is, maybe it is a bit premature to expose this, but I just want to bring into the context of my presentation, which is the idea of the closure. The Naga ancestral remains evoke the horrors associated with the acts of colonialism, even as Nagas in the larger colonial history were shackled within the bondage of a colonial misconstrued imaging. And it has left a deeply entrenched legacy in the Naga history and identity, having placed in stereotyped identity markers, and which continues to impinge to this day. And so the surmounting question being, if the Naga ancestral remains are brought back, how will Nagas decolonize? Will the Naga repatriation help generate a new Naga discourse without any colonial hangover or stereotyping? While the horrors associated with colonial history is one of the main talking points, one may also be reminded of the horrors and the mental trauma that the Nagas underwent during the Battle of Kohima of the World War II. The localized concentration camps in the name of grouping and the unjustified inhuman tortures and killings met at the hands of the Indian armies during the course of Naga struggle for self-determination. However, the Pit Rivers Museum's initiative to return Naga ancestral remains, having considered the ethicalities of displaying them and having expressed that they are very sorry for their wrongdoings, also creates a path of reconciliation and healing. In our own yard, coming from a culture of head hunting, Nagas are yet to get into the depth of history and the philosophy of the earlier practice of head hunting. However, the popularly tagged enemy heads taken legitimately or otherwise was hung to adorn the warrior's home, a symbolic accreditation of honor and social standing. As such, it was not a part of the Naga culture to return the enemy heads to their relatives, but with the coming of Christianity, the missionary intervention, the displayed skulls were slowly removed, unknown to many how the skulls were given a closure. However, narratives of feuds and warfare and taking heads among warring villages, though not in great detail, the bitter memories of which lives on. And in an attempt to forget and forgive the past bitter experiences and for seeking blessings over the years in the recent past, many of the so-called enemy villages of the past have come together in the spirit of reconciliation and bringing it to a closure and thereby rewriting history within the much needed reconciliation. Coming to the case of Naga Repatriation, it is the general public that has to come together and understand the very word repatriation beyond the simple understanding, bringing back and try to define the process and how to put a closure to the ancestral remains if it is decided to let the Naga ancestral remains return to our homelands. Instance being, the Konyak Union has committed in principle to support the repatriation process initiated by the FNR and the RRaD team, terming the process of repatriation important as well as historic, while also calling upon the Naga researchers to focus on the historical relevance and importance of the repatriation process. The Union also stressed on the pertinence of handling the human remains or cultural artifacts respectfully. Certain worldviews revolving around Naga culture and tradition, beliefs and practices continue to remain strongly etched in the Naga psyche even today, and a threshold continues to exist between culture, Christianity, history, and the larger worldviews. This begs the question, how will Naga repatriation look like? A larger predicament surrounding this is the still existing belief that a decent burial tantamount to rest for the weary spirit. The spirit of the dead is believed to roam restlessly unless it is given a decent final burial. With these considerations and for the changing times, many would share the view that human remains do not belong and goes beyond dignity of the displayed behind class of the 214 artifacts. If a classification has to be made, the bones, especially the skulls, for sure will evoke sensitivities, and differences will be there on the question of redisplaying the skulls after repatriation. Central to this is the issue of dignity, especially in the evolution of human rights, be it living or death. If a dignified closure, especially the skulls, means burial, then it is also a closure to a colonial remnant. For now, the closure stands at the threshold between preservation and burial. There is also the danger of dispersing the repatriation objective of decolonizing, which may find itself cast within a recolonizing model. This is also where the terms associated with RRaD, recover, restore, and decolonize, needs to be pragmatic, away from idealism. However, the most challenging aspect will be the issues relating to consent, which requires informed discussion. At stake is history, and a lot depends on the dialogue process. Irrespective of whatever final closure, what is important is for history to be salvaged. And there are also alternatives to exhibition. One is reburial or repatriation, return human remains to the communities of origin for proper burial or care. Another is digital representation, use digital technologies such as 3D scanning to create virtual representation for educational purposes. Then the third one, respectful storage. Store human remains in a respectful and secure manner, allowing for research and study while minimizing harm. In repatriation, digital representation or respectful storage may be considered for review, which are more, or so to say, appropriate approaches, and which prioritizes respect, exhibits cultural sensitivity, and the larger wishes and aspirations of the community and its associated values. Now the concluding remarks. For now, the concept of decolonization needs to move beyond the simple idea of withdrawal and bring to a closure within the Naga context. The word closure does not necessarily mean putting an end, but the closure without conflicts or differences, and where Nagas can confidently come to a collective understanding in recrafting and envisioning a new path towards envisaging a new Naga history of repatriation. There are also ways to preserve history, most importantly to salvage history. An opportunity is also presented to frame an indigenous pedagogy with regard to the closure and the way forward. Naga history has been part of students' curriculum in the state, and a Naga colonial text from within may be developed to recast this aspect of history to help undo, unlearn, and reimagine the past Naga history. How Nagas recast it today is going to reshape, reorient, and reignite a new Naga consciousness, identity, and history, while also relocating the colonial imaging. Coming from a culture of headhunting, the violence of colonial history may not generate painful feelings or provoke violence today, but the Naga ancestral remains will ignite a spectrum of memories to create a new Naga consciousness. As such, repatriation of Naga ancestral remains or the artifacts becomes crucial for the salvation of Naga history and for the future of Naga generations. It is not the case that Naga culture, history, and identity becomes complete or sufficient only if the Naga ancestral remains are brought back, nor is it about the question of completeness or becoming sufficient. Bringing back the Naga ancestral remains to Naga homeland is not some kind of romantic imagination, but in praxis, it adds to the larger discourse on Naga history. Today, as an observer, Nagas are confronted by a new and a rare exercise, and the Naga repatriation is currently processed in a dialogue. While availability of resources is critical to the process, every stage of the process is significant, and the initiative of FNR and RRaD as facilitators, creating awareness and trying to bring Naga communities together, need the support of the Naga people in aiding and facilitating the process, even as they try to critically engage the Naga community with informed knowledge, since the approach was collaborative. However, while trying to understand and engage in the Naga repatriation process, is desirable, any attempt at depoliticizing the process will undo the idea of ownership and unnecessarily stretch the process or even derail the process completely. On the larger whole, the death speaks in many ways and forms, and Nagas should create pathways to envisage and decolonize, and that history is not killed in closing and be reduced to imagined communities, a term used by anthropologist Benedict Anderson. While we may cast an uncertain timeline on this process of Naga repatriation, it all depends on the Naga mind and heart and the will, and therefore the opportunities so presented at crafting a new language, a new narrative, and a new Naga history beacons. And this is not to inject false optimism, but I feel with much enthusiasm and pragmatism that it is at the threshold. Thank you so much.